The Rarámuri Tarahumara are a Native American people of northwestern Mexico who are renowned for the long-distance running ability. In the language, the term Rarámuri refers specifically to the men. Women are referred to as mukí and as omugí or igómale. Originally inhabitants of much of the state of Chihuahua, the Rarámuri retreated to the high Sierras and canyons such as the Copper Canyon in the Sierra Madre Occidental on the arrival of Spanish explorers. In the 16th century, the area of the Sierra Madre Occidental which they now inhabit is often called the Sierra Tarahumara because of the presence. Estimates put the population of the Rarámuri in 2006 at between 50,000 and 70,000 people. Most still practice a traditional lifestyle, inhabiting natural shelters such as caves or cliff overhangs, as well as small cabins of wood or stone. Staple crops are corn and beans. However, many of the Rarámuri still practice transhumance, raising cattle, sheep, and goats. Almost all Rarámuri migrate in some form or another in the course of the year. The Tarahumara language belongs to the Uto-Aztecan family. Although it is in decline under pressure from Spanish, it is still widely spoken. History. The Rarámuri are believed to be descended from a people of the Mogollon culture. The Rarámuri repulsed and were never conquered by the Spanish conquistadors or fully converted by the Jesuit missionaries. When the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, they called this native people the Tarahumara. By the early 17th century, the Spanish had established mines in Tarahumara territory and made some slave raids to obtain workers for the mines. Jesuit Juan Fonte established a mission, San Pablo Beleza, at the southern end of Tarahumara territory, expanding from missionary work with the Tepehuan to the south. The Tepehuans' violent resistance to Spanish incursion in the Tepehuan revolt of 1616 killed Fonte and 7 other Jesuit missionaries, closing the mission for over a decade. The discovery of the mines of Parral, Chihuahua, in 1631 increased Spanish presence in Tarahumara lands, bringing more slave raids and Jesuit missionaries. Missions were established at Las Bocas, Hueyotitlan, San Felipe and Sativo. In 1648, the Tarahumara waged war against the Spanish. They gathered at Feriajic and then destroyed the mission of San Francisco de Borja. 2 of the leaders of this attack were captured by the Spanish and executed. Shortly afterward, the Spanish established Villa de Aguilar in the heart of the Upper Tarahumara country. From then on, the Tarahumara split into 2 groups. Those in the lower missions continued to move into the general Christian population and largely lost the tribal identity. Those in the upper areas went to war under the leadership of Teperame and others, driving the Jesuits and Spanish settlers from the area. The Jesuits returned in the 1670s and baptized thousands of Tarahumara, but these people retained a separate identity. Teperame was executed by the Spanish in 1690. From 1696 to 1698, the Tarahumara again waged war against the Spanish, but were defeated. An important 1691 Jesuit report concerned the resistance of the Tarahumara to evangelization, Historia de la Tercera Rebellion Tarahumara. By 1753, the lower Tarahumara missions were turned over to secular priests, and in 1767 the Jesuits were expelled in Spanish territories. Most missions in Tarahumara country ceased to operate or were turned over to Franciscans. Despite devoted and enthusiastic efforts, the Franciscans could not match the Jesuits' feats, and the missions declined. The Jesuits re-established the missions in the early 20th century. Culture, athletic skills. The Tarahumara, a word for themselves, Rarámuri, means runners on foot or those who run fast in the native tongue, according to some early ethnographers like Norwegian Carl Lumholtz, though this interpretation has not been fully agreed upon. With widely dispersed settlements, these people developed a tradition of long-distance running up to 200 miles in one session, over a period of 2 days through the homeland of rough canyon country, for inter-village communication and transportation and hunting. The Tarahumara's use of huaraches, a traditional form of minimal footwear, when running has been the subject of scientific study as well as journalistic discourse. In his book, Born to Run, author Christopher McDougall argues in favor of the endurance running hypothesis and a barefoot running movement based on his time with the Tarahumara people and the running in huaraches. The long-distance running tradition also has ceremonial and competitive aspects. Often, men kick wooden balls as they run in foot-throwing, raraji pari, competitions, and women use a stick and hoop. The foot-throwing races are relays where the balls are kicked by the runners and relayed to the next runner while teammates run ahead to the next relay point. These races can last anywhere from a few hours to a couple of days without a break. The Tarahumara commonly hunt with bow and arrows, but are also known for their ability to run down deer and wild turkeys. Anthropologist Jonathan E. Castle describes the Tarahumara's hunting abilities. The Tarahumara literally run the birds to death, forced into a rapid series of takeoffs, without sufficient rest periods between. The heavy-bodied bird does not have the strength to fly or run away from the Tarahumara hunter. Religious beliefs. The Rarámuri religion is a melange of indigenous customs and Roman Catholicism. During the late 1600s and early 1700s, there was strong Jesuit mission activity, which was met by resistance. Later, when the Jesuit order was expelled, the Rarámuri were left free to interpret, modify, maintain, or promulgate Catholic beliefs, symbols and practices with little outside intervention. While native religious elements have been maintained, there are Spanish Catholic ritual elements, demonstrating Virginia in integration with vital cultural interests. The beings of most importance are God, God's wife, who is the Christian Virgin Mary transformed, and the devil. Riosi is thought to be the indigenous deity Honorimi, and the Virgin Mary is Iawame. The indigenous counterparts of Father Sun and Mother Moon overlap, respectively, with these concepts of God and God's wife. Another reported variation is that God has a wife who lives with him in heaven, along with the sons, the so-called Su Cristo, and the daughters, the Santi. These beings have a direct link with the physical world through Catholic iconography, crucifixes and saints' medallions, respectively. Although Diablo aligns with the devil, the Rarámuri do not believe in a being that embodies evil wholly. Instead, it is tainted through its ties with the Shabochi. The devil is said to sometimes collaborate with God to arrange fitting punishments and can be appeased through sacrifices. In some cases, the devil can be persuaded to act as a benevolent entity. Some Rarámuri religious practices have the sense of konima, the sense of returning to God. A little of the much that he has given is prevalent. Some Tarahumaras maintain a belief that the afterlife is a mirror image of the mortal world and that good deeds should be performed not for spiritual reward, but for the improvement of life on earth. The Rarámuri share with other Uto-Aztecan tribes a veneration of peyote. Music and dance are highly integrated into Tarahumara social life. The classical pianist Romain Wheeler writes that music sanctifies the moment in the life of all the Tarahumaras, and all of our actions have musical meaning. During the end-of-the-year cycle, the Tarahumaras play violins which are masterfully carved but not varnished. The tunes are known as Metashan pieces and are danced by dancers lavishly dressed in colorful attire resembling North African garments and accompanied by rattles. During Lent they play three-holed flutes of river cane, together with drums. Food staple crops of the Tarahumara are maize, beans, greens, squash, and tobacco. Chili, potatoes, tomatoes, and sweet potatoes appear in Mexicanized regions. Corn is planted in February and March using oxen which are often loaned as not everyone owns one. Corn begins to flower in August. By November it is harvested and cooked or stored. Common corn dishes are pinole, tortillas, esquiate, atli, tamales, and boiled and roasted ears. Beans are one of the Tarahumaras' essential protein-rich foods and are usually served fried after being boiled. Tamales and beans are a common food which the Tarahumara carry with them on travels. Wheat and fruits were introduced by missionaries and are a minor source of nutrition. The fruits grown by the Tarahumara include apples, apricots, figs, and oranges. The Tarahumaras also eat meat, but this constitutes less than 5% of their diet. Most of the meats that they consume are fish, chicken, and squirrels. On ceremonial occasions, domesticated animals such as cows, sheep, and goats are killed and eaten. The Tarahumara practice persistence hunting of deer and wild turkeys by following them at a steady pace for 1 or 2 days until the animal drops from exhaustion. In the award-winning documentary Goshen film, the Tarahumara traditional diet is examined through interviews with Dr. William Connors, clinical dietary research expert. The traditional diet was found to be linked to the low incidence of diseases such as type 2 diabetes. However, the Tarahumara's health is transitioning in regions where processed goods have begun to replace the traditional staples. Customs gatherings for celebrations, races, and religious ceremonies often take place with Tesguinadas, a Tarahumara-style beer festival. These gatherings take place all year around, but most happen in winter and are the social events between the neighboring Tarahumara people. Tesguinada events include rain fiestas, harvest ceremonies, curing fiestas, Guadalupe fiesta, Holy Week, races, and Sunday gatherings. Some of these events take place during and after communal activities. For example, when neighbors help one another's families with the fields of building large structures like granaries, houses, and corrals. The harvest and rain ceremonies take place during the farming months to ensure a good crop season. These events also require either a shaman, curandero, or chanter. The job of the shaman and curandero are purely religious, as the curandero is to diagnose and to heal the sick of the community, and chanters lead the Tesguinadas in chants and rhythms to accompany the ceremonies. Tesguinadas are an important aspect of Tarahumara culture, as it is often the only time when men have intercourse with the wives. They act as a social lubricant, as Tarahumara are very shy and private. Anthropologist John Kennedy describes the institution of Tesguinada as an important social fabric to Tarahumara culture, which he calls the Tesguino network. He also states that the average Tarahumara spends at least 100 days per year directly concerned with Tesguino, and much of this time under its influence or after effects. The religious role of Tesguino is a very important aspect of Tesguinada. Before one can drink an olla of Tesguino, they must dedicate it to Honorami, During the curing ceremonies, the olim is dressed in front of a cross until the ceremony is over. At age 14, a boy is allowed to drink tezguino for the first time after a short sermon about his manly responsibilities. These rituals can sometimes last as long as 48 hours. Tezguinadas are usually accompanied by dancing and the playing of fiddles, flutes, drums and guitars. Tezguino is a fermented drink made year-round from sprouted corn. Sometimes it is also made with still green stalks, fruits of certain cactuses, shrubs, wheat, and trees when corn is sparse. The process begins by malting the corn and spreading it in a shallow basket covered with pine needles each day for 4 or 5 days. It is kept in moist until the corn sprouts, by which the starch in the corn has fermented. It is then mashed and boiled for 8 hours. Varied herbs are ground up and mixed with water into a paste which is then fermented overnight by a fire. Then the paste is combined with the corn liquid and fermented for another 3 to 4 days. Tezguinadas usually take place soon after, as the tezguino can spoil within 24 hours. Notable Rarámuri: Daniel Ponce de Leon, former WBO World Junior Featherweight Champion. Isidro Baldenegro Lopez, community leader and activist. Edwin Bustillos, award-winning agricultural engineer. Threats: environmental factors. Logging has occurred since the end of the 1800s, when the first loggers arrived. Later, liberalization of laws in the 1990s resulted in the exhaustion of resources. In 1995, it was declared that, after 100 years of logging, only 2% of these unique forests remains, leaving one of the most biologically diverse ecosystem in North America, containing hundreds of medicinal plants, oak types and pine species on the brink of extinction. The Mexican Commission of Solidarity and Defense of Human Rights produced a report in 2000 noting the lack of studies by the government on how lumber production affected the ecosystem. Similarly, the North American Free Trade Agreement boosted foreign investment, which resulted in the privatization of communal land and market-based mechanisms of environmental regulation. Drought has also been affecting the region for 10 years and has worsened in recent years. During 2011, it was the driest year in Mexico in record, with just 12 inches of rain, compared to a historic average of 21 inches. The most severely hit area was the Sierra Madre region. Agricultural losses in Chihuahua are estimated at $25 million. 180,000 cattle have already died as a result of the growing lack of precipitation in the region. Due to the lack of water, crops were destroyed and famine spread. Combined with freezing temperatures of a cold front, living conditions have become poor for the Rarámuri. The dependence on the environment worsens the situation, as they lack employment opportunities to generate income in non-farming activities. Moreover, increased contact with the outside world might be damaging, as it creates dependency. These indigenous people face extreme poverty, as reflected in the Mexican Human Development Index, which in the Sierra Madre is the lowest in the country, 49.1% below national average. Alberto Herrera, the Mexican director of Amnesty International, stated that the indigenous people in his country have endured permanent discrimination, exclusion and marginalization. Mining dates to 950 AD with the Toltec and Mayan civilizations. Since the Spanish conquest, thousands of tons of mercury and lead have been released in the Mexican mining belt, which stretches from Oaxaca to Sonora in the northwest. The Sierra Madre part of this belt is one of the world's most prolific gold and silver mining districts. Georgius Agricola mentioned in 1556 that mining led to deforestation, the disappearance of wild wildlife and watershed contamination. Large areas were deforested to exploit metal deposits. Reforms in the 1990s allowed foreign ownership, and resulted in reopening of mines and increased mining. According to the Secretariat de Economía, 204 mining companies with direct foreign investment had 310 ongoing projects in Mexico in 2006. In 2010, Mexico's mining output reached high levels. 19% of the world's silver production was extracted here, and the mining belt was the world's most productive district as it was historically. The environmental impacts are dramatic, resulting in landscape change and the spread of heavy metals. Drugs, drug violence, cultivation and trade in this region has affected the lifestyle of the Rarámuri. Given the proximity of the people and the Sierra Madre, one of the most productive drug-growing regions on Earth, logging is not only controlled by the Mexican government, but also practiced illegally by loggers and drug lords who use the forests to grow marijuana or opium or as space for their operations. Drug cartels usually have links with logging companies who launder money earned in the drug trade. Narco-trafficking weighs heavily on the Tarahumara, as the drug lords force the farmers to grow drugs instead of their own crops. Violence between drug cartels results in killing and torture of the Tarahumara people. Tourism. The remote terrain of the Sierra Madre has long served as a refuge of the Tarahumara. However, roads and tourism have expanded, bringing opportunities for some but problems for others. Ironically, the Rarámuri themselves seldom have sought this publicity. In the 1800s, attempts were made to build a railway. Currently, this line is used by the train Chihuahua, Pacifico or El Chepe to transport tourists, lured by false representations of the area as pure and pristine, to sightseeing locales. It stops near many Tarahumara villages, attracting visitors expecting to see primitive natives. Along with new autoroads, railways built into the area have developed lumbering and tourism, which have accelerated the rate of modernization among the Indians. The Tarahumara seek to economically gain from tourism by attempting to meet travelers' expectations and romanticization of the way of life. They portray authenticism by complying with the stereotypical image of the noble savage. Bibliography. Fontana, Bernard, Tarahumara, Where Night is the Day of the Moon. Flagstaff, Northland Press. Spicer, Edward H. Cycles of Conquest. The Impact of Spain, Mexico, and the United States on the Indians of the Southwest 1533 to 1960. Tucson, University of Arizona Press.